Onegaishimasu. Okay. Some of you may know if you've been on Facebook or people call around sometimes, but Anno Sensei passed yesterday. He was in his mid 90s, so long, productive life. Okay. And I got a call yesterday from Linda Holiday Sensei, and she's been in communication with him for since for years and years. And she let me know 7 a.m. yesterday. So I put the picture of him in one of his visits here. And at the end of class, I'm just going to do a short Norito prayer chant for him. Okay? So that's, yeah. So actually, of my teachers in Japan, he was the last one. Hikizuchi Sensei, Yanase Sensei, Tojima Sensei had passed. And so Anno Sensei was the last. Anyway, up. And let's see. Keep rotating the hip. And we're establishing spatial dynamics. And this is hard to do. Now this hand, and right here, there's danger area right here where you, yeah. So it's very important that as you're doing, you get to here, past the elbow. Come elbow. Okay, so safer, okay. Now, Anno Sensei's movements were very sweeping and, all right. But there's a science to it as well. And sometimes, people get into the art of it. And, there's a step where you are a scientist, and as you progress being a scientist, you become an artist. And sometimes people go a little too quick for art. Okay, so first of all, establish distance, like here. Ready on this side, good. And, okay, so we're just going to start out with the Irimi Nage motion that way. Okay, with a partner. Yeah. And one of the things, even if you're grabbed here, all right, yeah, see what I mean? It's like, well, I like the flow. Well, I'm grabbed. Okay. Right? In other words, oh, I like that flowing style, but now I'm grabbed. What do I do? Oh. Offer, step, put your hips in that motion, okay? And now what we're doing right here is then obviously that can be a more flowing motion. Anno Sensei, for example, he would do a lot of really big flowing. This is kind of his style. Take him in this direction. Oh, yeah. A lot of his movements were big. Yeah. And a lot of people copy that. But, one of the people he hung out with a lot was Tojima Sensei. And you really want to be a scientist as well as an artist. You see what I mean? So I'm an artist here without motion. But you're boom, boom, whatever, boom, 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 right there. Yes. And so they hung out together and they were very close. It really almost destroyed Anno Sensei and Tojima Sensei passed. But Tojima Sensei was kind of like this guy who analyzed everything, and Anno Sensei was just, the big flowing field of energy, and they just hung out together. They were a nice pair. Every sometimes Tojima Sensei would have a question, so he'd go to Anno Sensei, and Anno Sensei would have a question, and he and Tojima Sensei would work it out. It was interesting, right? But anyway, so I right about here. Okay. Good enough elbow. Okay. And one of the things right here, see if I'm sitting here, elbow, right? Over here. Good. And grab. Good. Okay, now. Hmm. If I'm this way, then there's an opening there, isn't there? So we all boom, come on. Good. Yeah. So yeah, there's an art form, way that Koga Sensei put it, there's an art form. There's also a science that backs it up. Right. Yes. And so you need both dimensions. All right. Okay. 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 Now, several things right here. What we're doing, for example, here, she's there, she grabs. This is not a static situation. One thing we're doing is we're studying spatial relations. Now, most of the time, she comes and grabs the body. Okay, that's going to happen more often. Somebody grabbing the wrist. Well, but one thing that happens right there is you're creating space, aren't you? Now she grabs here, but okay, boom. Come on in, good. That's the whole thing collapsed into a, you're gonna, all right. But it's also good to explore bigger. So right about here, boom, come on in, good, good. And full motion. Establish space. As you establish space, you establish connection. That's good. Oh, let's go this way. Good. And carry. Come on in. But you're safe behind. And okay, so let's take that opening motion into more movement. And then we'll break it down a little bit. I want you to kind of move. See if you can kind of establish the space. See, to really establish connection, there must be space. With Anno Sensei, his space was very vast. Okay. And through that space, he had a real connection. In fact, he did a lot of flowing artistic movement, but he was conversant in the science of the movement as well. Okay. So let's keep the same partner, go into the evening now here. Attended to. Da, 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 da. Now, right to right, I Dorothy. Oh, that's this thing. Now, the very first time I ever worked with honor sensei, I was here, right? And he did that. It wasn't any physical contact, right? In other words, he didn't go this way. He moved. I moved. It was. I still remember that because the night before I trained in Hongo and got bloodied up by the guy who just smashed me in the face and everything like that. And then we had a private lesson with Anno Sensei, and I don't know what to expect. And he just put me at ease. He's right back to me. He just started to move, and I started to move. It was a startling contrast. Okay, if you're coming in this direction, boom, right? If I come in this way, boom, boom. And then it's a bigger emotion, boom, bigger emotion. Boom. Okay, so on the other hand, let's say you come in this direction, I'm going here, and you want to walk past the elbow, right? Right, but come in with the elbow. It's a science to it. You don't sit. You say, in fact, they were a good combination. And there was Renasa Sensei who movement, but he was like moving steel. So they were, then there was Hikizuchi Sensei, that area like it. But going back just to Hatake Dori, yeah, right about here. Even, because most of the time this is kind of done as a flow practice. But if you do grab other stuff, And then, if you do grab, good, 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 come on in, good. Right, right. Oh, one of the things, if you're coming this way, that motion. If I kind of go this way, it's a set to move, exactly. So I'm going, now, if you grab this way, you're gonna elbow me, good. Next, you're gonna elbow me, good. You fall into my trap. There's no set in that entering motion. And so they were kind of a nice pair, almost Sensei and Toshima Sensei. And sometimes they have a Toshima Sensei have a question, and after class they would work it out. Or Anno Sensei would have a question, and they would just get together and work it out. It was interesting to see, right? Because sometimes people get too much into the art fast. And then if you just stay kind of within the mental science, that's not good. Toshima Sensei was never. But he examined everything, every little inch of the movement. And all since it was this big sweeping thing, so it was a good combination. Okay. 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 Now, yeah. So there's this kind of, like the art form. That's why, Koga Sensei was interesting. Because, he said, I like the art form. But a lot of people didn't like him in the Aikido community because they kind of saw him as being very, Aikido isn't any good. It's what I do, which is with cops and it's more jujitsu like. But I used to hang out with him and not really what he was about. It was nice. Tojima Sensei and Koga Sensei, they kind of represented, the scientist, where you take a movement and you really dissect it. And then somebody like Anno Sensei was good because you take the whole thing and it was like a holistic experience, right? And so going back and forth, sometimes they would both be in the class and Hikazuchi Sensei would be teaching. And so you get a chance, you train with Anno Sensei one-on-one, then you train with Tojima Sensei one-on-one, then you get Yanasa Sensei one-on-one. And so, I learned probably more on the one-on-one sessions because what happens when somebody teaches, you pick up their style, okay? And you might like, Linda Holiday Sensei, she really loved Anno Sensei, okay? And I did too, okay? But I kind of gravitated more towards Tojima Sensei and Yanase Sensei. It's just personality differences, okay? So one of the things that we're kind of looking at, there's kind of an art form, but there's also kind of a science to it. Okay. And a lot of times what you find is that really good science is art. So you need both. Okay. Now, one of the things is that, the actual bigger movement flow style really appeals to certain people. And then more the inch by inch, dissect it and further dissect it, that appeals to certain people. Okay. So, it really, and really it's nice to have both. Okay. So, why don't we, for example, the same attack here, just what we're going to really do. Okay, see if I can do this a little bit more. I haven't done it very and if it's going to. Anno Sensei would do this this movement is very sweeping. Okay, boy. Very sweeping. Okay. Kojima Sensei's movement, boom. He was kind of a master of the striking stuff. And boom, the stuff. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He'd throw you, it was like a sonic boom. So, but it was nice to have both. And so what I'm doing is highlighting various things. And you'll find one appeals to you at one stage of your development, and another may at another stage of development. That's about development. But right here, what I like us to do is as he's coming in, a bigger style. Now, right here, there's a potential opening, but there is that connection. Okay, so big sweeping motion and right, big sweeping motion and so there's both there. Okay, if I get too caught up in the big sweeping motion, and that's not too cool. Okay, I'm getting so caught up in artwork that I'm losing some of my basic perspectives. I'm slashing things on canvas and think I'm an artist. And somebody goes, maybe you ought to go to art school. Okay, but one of the things here, now, for example, there's a connection here. It doesn't have to be, and right about here, it all comes together. And when Anno Sensei did it, I don't do it anywhere near as well as he did. I'm a little bit more Tojima and Yanase with it. All right. And I've gotten more that way in the year, but bigger, yes. And bigger, yes. But he didn't have an opening. You see what I mean? He was like doing this beautiful flowing thing, but his movements were sound. If you get too caught up in like just trying to do what he was doing as a style, he probably would miss a lot of his depth. And so it was good to kind of work with Tojima Sensei and you go, yeah, okay, I got to watch these points. For example, here, if I just go here, there's an opening here. So right about here, you just boom, and everything comes together right about there. Now he's doing a back roll. It takes more space to do that, so be very careful. It's a nice one because it keeps the flow going a little bit more. We don't do a lot of back rolling, okay? But you might want to do that. But when you're doing that, make sure you don't back roll with somebody, okay? All right, let's change partners. We'll do the step back piece, the Shiho Nage motion. Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things right here, if you're coming in this direction, so just, yeah, so right there, you're coming this way. Now, you might say, Sensei, for example, when he would really emphasize that, yeah, and boom, okay? And you just were running on your tippy toes behind him. But one of the things about Arnold Sensei, he had that as a basic in a more flowing style. And you could miss the connection and the depth of that motion. It just got caught up in the beauty of his movements. You see what I mean? Yeah. It's a real tricky, right? Yes. Yeah, because what it is right there. If you're here, and I get punched in the ribs, or right about here, you're solid, and I just movement breaks down. And so he kind of had this flow, but easy right here, right about here, everything came together that way. And so, what I find is people that get too much into that style, they don't have this depth, right? And you'll find that certain features kind of you gravitate towards, and and maybe in a certain stage of development, the gravitates this feature or that feature. Like I for whatever reason, I got a lot of work with Yanase Sensei. I remember, for example, here, he see this function, and then this thing where the sound tail you go this way. Well, he would You know, the Sankyo, you know, where you go this way. You go this way and then you say this. Well, he would literally, yeah, walk and walk and then boom. Yeah. And, you know, there was an exudative feeling where all the tendons and ligaments in your wrist could pop, but he would not do it. In fact, you know, I remember one time I was working with Stan Fran and he came over and he just threw us. And afterwards, Stan said, Jack, we should thank the man because he took us right to the edge. He could have just snapped our elbow at any point, and we were perfectly safe, right? And you know, this part of that, but you know, Anno thinks that, but you know, it's relieving. But he had that depth thing. And so what's really hard is, you know, you can get really caught up, you know, in the style, you know. So it was, as I said, I learned probably more from being partners with those people than when they taught a class. Because when you're trying to learn the style, but when you're working one-on-one with them, and they're uke nage with you, you know, it's a little different. You know, think, oh, okay, right? You know, okay, anyway. Okay. Okay. Now, one of the things, for example, you know, there are a variety of different approaches. Let's just say, let's do the same technique, but switch to the yokel man. Okay. Now, Hikiguchi Sensei, what he would do. See, there's an opening right here, you know, where you go like this and you go like, there's an opening there. Okay. And for example, Hikiguchi Sensei, he would boom, he would close it with a strike and then he'd, you know, down. Okay. Right. And Anno Sensei was a bit different. Okay. In other words, what he kind of had was that you know it was kind of a really beautiful, more receptive aspect to it. Okay, which is hard sometimes to do because you know then you make a style out of it, and then maybe you don't have the depth. But he didn't have an opening. You see, what he was doing was beautiful. You know, Aikido is beauty. Yes, it is. But there's also other elements to it, other dimensions. And so if he's coming in this direction, good. We have the same thing. Didn't intend to do that, but it happened. Okay. Now examine that motion. That's a more flowing approach. In other words, Hikiguchi Sensei was very angular, right? Boom. Kojima Sensei was very similar. Boom. 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 Yanasa Sensei was kind of like Mobiano Sensei sweeping motion, but he felt like moving steel. Okay, so, but let's examine what looks like a more flow situation as he's coming in. You're not blocking. Come on in. Now, from here, we have that same thing that we had with the hand grab. Okay. Now, one thing people don't like to do these days is examine the openings that are possibly there. In Japanese, ski ga aru. There's an opening. What does that mean? It means my mind is out there somewhere, leaving a gap here. Okay. So right about here, come on in. This is good, 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 good. Good, 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 good. That way. And you know, this is not about fighting at all. This is about, in some sense, working on perfecting your sense of yourself in this interaction. Okay, these movements are like algorithms, and you never stop learning them. If you think you've got it, you get stiff, or conversely, you get very, very popular. You have a style that people like to do, which is right. You see what I mean? It's crazy that way, but you know, I scout people on YouTube and watch the stuff, and there's some people that are very good, and they're all styles. And Hikisuchi said, well, not Hikisuchi Sensei, but O Sensei, I don't think was doing a style. He was in the moment, blending with what was happening in a way that was almost transcendent. In fact, it probably was transcendent. We oftentimes see things in terms of technique. What he was doing was technique, yes, but it was much more than that. And I sense they kind of had some of that, you know, because he had that smooth focus, but you know, the science of it's still important. Okay, so when somebody's coming at you, you know, you are, come on and say, you're right about here. All that's one smooth. I don't do that style very well, by the way. I just don't. Okay. Okay, I'm a bit more angular. I'm a bit more analytic about things. And Linda Holiday does it very well. Okay. But let's switch to the striking motion, the Yoko man, and go into Shihonage. Okay? All right? A different partner. Ah, no, no, no. Okay. Yeah, one thing about that, for example, here, don't elongate this. Okay, now, yeah, when I'm doing this too much, I lose it. And then, you know, then you crowd me and it's hard for me to move. Okay? You know, if I go, see this motion, I'm swinging the arm too much. Okay, good. Then it comes in that one. So you want to be the center. You don't want to move out in the circle. See, people sometimes they look at the Anno Sensei, all they see is the circle, but he had a center. Yeah. I remember what was kind of interesting is Anno Sensei and I didn't really get along very well. But that was spot openings, you know, what he was doing. And what was interesting about Anno Sensei is that as much as he was very smooth, for me, he had no openings. Whereas Kato Sensei was, you do this to me, I'll break your arm. Yes, I know you can do that. Such as a whole bit, you know. And with Anno Sensei, the style was beautiful and everything, but there was no hole. And you get too caught up in the style, the beauty of what he was doing, and miss the actual substance. And the beauty and the substance, there are other qualities, but you know, yes, it was beautiful. Yes, it was harmonious. Yes, it was fun. Working with him after you worked with the Anasa Sensei was nice. Right? I know. And I was like, I know. Well, and you get dissected by the Anasa Sensei, and then you kind of get put back together by us. They were, you know, yeah. But you see that feeling right here. If you go a little too this way, then you get crowded then. Okay, good. Yes. And honestly, Yanasa Sensei had that to an extreme. But also say have, you see what I mean? He never heard of this. And I know that that's not very much in terms of the knowledge, because you know, the spiral, reverse spiral, if you're coming in this direction, this is the spiral out, but it's also the spiral back. You see? right? There's a science to it. And also, for example, here, I'm going like this, and yeah, there's an opening to the face, right? Make sure to just cover your face. And that's usually where you find the reverse spiral, right? In other words, if you're coming in here and I'm gonna weed this out, yeah, okay. This can be done in a way that has some flow to it. Right? But sometimes if somebody, you're attracted to somebody, I mean, if he's just Yanasu Sensei was making power. Yeah, pretty attractive at some point here in Japan, but it's nice to have other influences. And I began to say, yeah, and that was probably with me. I was a little bit more. I established a real strong connection with it, but I also had a real strong connection with Anno Sensei. So, but anyway, keep going. Ah, okay. Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah. One of the things that I kind of want to do, okay. Now, since we're doing this one, okay, Yokomen slash attack. Okay, I mean here, careful if it's long, but boom, cover it, take it, got a movement. Now, come with a stab. Okay, I just lose my wrist. So, there's a certain area where you can get a general sense of things, but then there's the specific school. Okay, I actually posted it there, which is Richard Feynman's thing. We learn the formulas. Like the Shihonage is a formula. And what is a part of formula? It's called form. But what Mr. Feynman says, I posted that quote there, is that, people teach people to pass tests and nobody knows anything. Because what happens is what you learn when you pass tests are formulas. But his contention is that you have to be able to analyze and think. And the formulas are just to get you going. Okay? You may be attracted to a particular style. I went through a period where I was attracted to this style and that style, everything like that. But one of the things, for example, if he's coming with a stabbing motion, the yokomen doesn't apply, does it? Right? Right? If he's coming with a slashing motion, right, then you want to be in the inside, and right here you don't want to be too sloppy, so there's this motion. Now, careful right here, you don't stab yourself. You see? So it's not that you want to get too paranoid about stuff. But what I'm just saying is you have to think past the formula. If you learn the formula, generally what happens is you get very satisfied with the style. Okay? And we're all attracted to different styles. Okay? Okay, in the 90s, I used to take my daughter to Asian basketball and I get a side hoop and I try to be Michael Jordan. Okay, 90s. Okay. And if I were there now, I would be trying to be Stephen Curry because you have people you kind of they inspire you. All right. And when I was in my 40s, I could take off from this side of the basket and do the layup on the other side. I can't do that anymore, but I can step back and shoot from 23, 24 feet. So I couldn't do that back then. So you try different things, whether it's basketball or Aikido. Now, one of the things here, for example, with the stab, okay, good. the yokomen entry motion, he's going out to the side to come back to the center. And so what you do is you keep him going that way. Right? And right about here, for example, what do? Well, I push on the arm, I twist it. No, well, I do that. Okay. And I've never liked that takeaway, but that's the way it's taught. So do it. So there again, it's a formula, right? I probably jam my knee on the elbow, and try to disable the arm. I wouldn't try to do that fancy thing. But then again, you can't practice that here, right? You didn't come to class for somebody to break your elbow, but somebody's attacking you with a knife. You don't want to necessarily do a stylized response, okay? But the nice thing about it is that, for example, if I block here, right? So when he's going out, okay, and see, I don't want to stab myself, so I got to really. So what I'm doing a little bit is just showing you a process where you examine what you're doing. And really, you're not really examining the movement. You're examining your own thought process around the motion, which creates your movement. Okay? So what we're going to do, we just hold that for a second. We're just going to go out here, right? Yeah. We'll take the hip, and right here, don't twist the arm. In karate, this is a ridge hand. Boom. Okay? Rotate your hip and get that bend. If there's something there, you disarm it. But if there's something there, you don't want to poke yourself or cut yourself. So, what I'm really trying to do right here is just a different situation we haven't done in a while. The entry movement to the yokomen. Okay? And we showed it with the tanto. There's no tanto right now. But doesn't mean you should be paranoid about that, but examine it. Okay? All right. So again, what we're doing is we're reflecting, not blocking. You are the center. He is the circle. Okay, I'm going to tip, keep control, not try to bend the arm. This is a rule. You make him turn around, rotate your hip here, get the bend. Okay. All right. So let's change to the. I'm not going to hold a weapon right there, but you saw it. Okay, putting that in your thought process. Okay, let's let the rotate work with a different partner. Okay, let me take that back. Yeah. Ah. Yeah. That's a useful movement. If somebody comes to throw a hook at you, okay, good. No, anything. That's a Koga special. Somebody, people are not going to attack you with a stylized sword attack here. But if somebody's coming this way, see, they go out to come back to the center, correct? And so what you're doing is you're sticking him in the out. Now, if he's no weapon, then other things that we can do here. The other thing is, yeah, there's a lot of things you can do. As as Mr. Feynman said, people get so satisfied with formulas. People teach people to pass tests, and nobody knows anything, right? And, you teach police, so, you realize that, a lot of what we do here is just tip of the iceberg.
Really useful.
Yeah. I mean,
They don't have
tip of-
testing.
yeah, the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I learned a lot from Koga Sensei, because I used to watch him, he was teaching cops, so I'd go in there and examine what he was doing. Sometimes he'd come over and I asked him a question about it. Because, you have to, if all you do is accept what's being shown you in front of a class, is that you get, your learning is too superficial. Or conversely, what I find a lot of people that really like Anno Sensei stuff, it's way into the art, which is beautiful. It's open, beautiful. And, I have my thoughts about it because there's a lot of that around. Right. I did a lot of it. If I said it to a lot of people, they'd get really pissed off at me. So I don't say anything. But, right. Okay. Fine. And, what we do here, because the thing is, the Anno Sensei stuff, he did not have an opening. It's not that he worked on that one, but his movements are flowing and beautiful and inclusive and everything. And the people that try to copy that style, they're never depth. Linda does. But then again, everybody else all of a sudden is trying to do that style. One thing that Mary Heine said, when I first got to Japan, I was talking to Linda. Don't be in too much of a hurry to develop a style. These people would come down from Tokyo. I studied Yamaguchi, and it's very obvious. They were very good at a stylized movement. All I was doing is getting wiped out, as I was thinking, I don't have the style, and then over the years, yeah, you do have one, but, you're not trying to be anybody. If I take a basketball to the court, I tried to do Stephen Curry, I just dribbled the ball off my knee. And I was going to try, but he did. Oh, it's humbling, right? Okay, keep going. All right. Yeah, 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 yeah. I think I kind of want you to look at, okay? If he's done a yokel man, he's going out to the side, come back to the center. But what you really want to do, you want to catch him on the out. Okay? Yeah. Okay, so if you're yokelmaning, so you're coming to the side to come back to the center, and what happens to people? They block you. When you block, you set, which means when you go here, you're open. Okay, so what I'm going to do a little bit, see how? Yeah, yeah. You really want to lock them in the motion out, so they don't get you by coming back to the center. That's the opening, right? Now, if you come with a roundhouse, it's the same motion. Right? Well, I wasn't intending that, but what happens is a lot of times if what's really difficult sometimes is to, because we're not really training other than, we're not training for fighting. But there's an art that's based on the science, right? And if you get too into the art too fast without some of the science, you get into a style. And when you do that, you oftentimes specialize maybe too early and you think you have all the answers because you're doing this style, right? And for example, Nado Sensei, when he was at Hombu, depending on the day you train with Yamaguchi or Osawa or Arikawa. And so what he told me was this, what day is today? Oh, okay, that's the style I do. And then what happens by training, you develop the personality. And so, you didn't really, we were working with your Nasa sensei, you really didn't try to be Anno sensei. It's just, it's a point where you say, okay, I'm here to empty and learn and feel. And, so you kind of, by being Uke, you begin to realize that as much as they were very different, Anno and Nasa was, they both did not have an opening in their movement. They had a holistic element of it, which is past the style. And you might like, Linda loved Anno sensei, just gravitated. That was it. And I did too. He was a lot of, he was just incredibly beautiful, right? He'd pick me up and we'd go into the mountains and he says, show me some Tai Chi. And so we would do some Tai Chi. He's very open. I mean, but and then, that was beautiful. It was just one-on-one. Pick me up and they go on a day trip somewhere. He's very generous with his time. And when I was on the mat, it's like, he has a lot of depth to him. And you might like his outer approach, but then when where I was, you had to deal with the Anno, and you had to deal with Ikizuchi sensei. You come in this way and, boom. You come in this way, boom. You see what I mean? In fact, I probably, after all these years, I probably do him better than the others, you know, which is kind of too bad because, I really, on a personal basis, I was so close to Hikazuchi Sensei that sometimes when you get too close to somebody, you go, oh boy, and I was close to the others, but it's a much different relationship. So Hikazuchi Sensei, he's going to overwhelm you with his food. And not so with the others, right? So, sometimes what you have to do is, these are like Einstein's equations. Sensei would be somebody who scribbled on a blackboard, but these were his equations for understanding the universe, the yin yang of it, the fire, water, the heaven, earth, other things, how to stand on the floating bridge of heaven, whatever it is you might call it, right? And you can't get that doing a style, right? That's a tricky one. So keep going. Okay.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. And one of the things here is, and there are different things, that you pick up or kind of mentioning probably over the years. The style that I tend to see things in is actually more Hikazuchi Sensei. Okay. And one of the things that, Anno Sensei could do all the movements. And as much as you would say he's flowing and he talked about nature, I mean, of the people, right? This training with him was the most fun. Training with Tojima Sensei was fun too. It was just fun in a different way because you get bounced around. You find out everything you were off on in an entertaining way, right? You find out about your openings and you bounce your head like Stephen Curry bouncing a basketball and everything was good. And, I mean, remember, I was working with this, Sensei's son comes in and teaches a class at the time. It was 1974. Mary Heine and I were in in Santa Cruz, and we went up to San Francisco. And Nidai, second dojo, Sensei Sun taught. And there was a guy over there, and he was doing a Saito style where he would kind of put his hip in there and do a kind of a Meki Rimi Nagi into a Koshi Nagi. And it was fun. And then he'd come on in and I'd come like that, where like Tojima Sensei and his head would bounce like a basketball. And it wasn't competition. We were just sort of just training, And then we found out later that Dosha was pissed off because nobody was doing quote unquote his style. Right. So you have to be respectful. I mean, I didn't know. We're just kind of, this guy throws me over his hip. Okay, I'm going to bounce his head like Stephen Curry. And, we were doing that and enjoying it, right? And Dosha was standing there going, what are these guys doing in my class, right? So you have to be respectful sometimes, if you go to a class and somebody's doing a style, that's the style you do, right? And then what happens is that's why a lot of people eventually, when you're developing, you kind of want to do some teaching because you want to be you, you want to feel you. But then again, some people get too caught up in kind of the art of it, whether it's bouncing somebody's head on the mat or whatever it is. And the whole point of it is that we want to be constantly growing. Okay. And since we have a little time, one of the things that I do want to go is, if he's coming in this direction, okay, what we're going to do, we're going to initiate the movement. And this is something Hikizuchi Sensei thought, but Anno Sensei could do it very well too. All I want to be able to do is get him to raise his hand to cover his face. Boom, I don't want to have to poke him in the eye or anything, but he's coming in, then we're going to do the original. As he's getting up, I'll move, 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 and boom. Okay, that was the initiating style. And as much as Anno Sensei was very beautiful at that, he could do it, he would do it a little bit more like that. He would just like, boom, 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 draw you into that beautiful spiral. Ikizuchi Sensei was a bit more angular. Kojima Sensei, for example, would get you here, and you go, boom. And it was like Curry dribbling a basketball. All right. So they all had their style, but it was past the style, that was them. And so one of the things about it, you don't want to, as Mary Heine told me when I first got this, is don't try to get a style too fast. Just train, develop yourself. A style will come naturally after a period of time. And you work with different people, and you're adding to your own base of understanding your own Aikido. Okay, so let's do the initiating style. Okay, of the Irimi Nage, not waiting for the attack, but all you got to do is going to come at me. I'll just get him to raise his arm. Well, that's all I need. Then you initiate that motion. You don't attack the UK. It's an involuntary response. Not much of an attacker. And then you're right in the Irimi position. Okay, different partner. Now, yeah. One of the things like, okay, if you're coming this way, boom, you go this way, boom. Now, if you're getting up, connections, boom, boom. Cover it, because boom, it's, yeah, I got that much. Right. Now, from distance, you see, it's usually that one. But in close, and as you're getting up, it's like boom, right there. Keep the connection between like boom, boom, boom. Okay, so try to keep them connected between the throws. Okay, and that's not a style. That's just personal development in the it's a machine, continuing mind, continuing spirit. Not like it's done. It's never done. Your own development doesn't end. Just let it grow. You see what I mean? Okay. Yeah. And one of the things here is the tendency to be that all I got to do is get you to raise you. You see what I mean? Right about here, all I got to do is get you to raise your hand. It's an involuntary response. And from distance, it's like I got this much. But most action is serious when somebody's moving on you. You see what I mean? And for that, right? So you're going to come, you're not going to do a stylized short attack. You'll come in this way, boom. Then there's that motion. Boom. You see that feeling a little bit like this? Oh, Anno Sensei would do it in a more sweeping style, but he would boom, there was no opening here. He would add that little extra circle to it. See what I mean? Which was fun. And then, the Nasa Sensei would take you right about here. And when you were getting up, he would get you in this vice. And Tojiba Sensei, he would kind of blow, and he would, what was that? Huh? And then when Hikichi Sensei called you up, boom, and you like away and boom. It'd be that field of energy, right? It was all. There were, but what it is a little bit. I'm gonna that all I gotta do is get you to raise your hand. Boom, boom, boom. See that motion? I don't want to poke you in the eyes. So if you're coming and boom, raise it. Okay. Okay. You see that feeling? This point where I don't want to poke somebody in the eyes. If I can make him raise your hand, I can do the movement. And in close, you're going to come in and they're not going to do a stylized thing like that, but I can get you to do that. And we can do this instead of going into a wrestling match. You see the feeling of it right there? I remember one time Robert Koga was teaching a class. And this smart ass, because he teach him step to the side, right? Said, somebody knows how do you do that. In other words, I know you're going to step there, so I'm going to hit you. And so you know what he did? He hit the guy in the face and then hit him anyway. I thought, yeah, I mean, that's an extreme case, right? But we kind of want to develop, in a way, we very seldom does Korea ever get a shot block. Because in a lot of ways, if you're a defender, you're tall, raise your hand. You're going to block the shot. If I go that way, boom. All he's got to do is get them to set and lower, and then he's up in that shooting motion. And I thought, yeah, that's what we want to do with the initiating style. You see, I don't want to poke anybody in the face, but right? Or if you're thinking about it, it's like, there's already you kind of, Sensei's case right here, he's somewhere else right there. You see, I mean, how much of that you want to rely on, but okay. Anyways,
Thank you, sir.
okay. Okay. Well, we're going to do some weapons today, which we've been doing. So I thought we'd do the sword. So if you brought a book in, there's a couple of extra, in fact, somebody wants one or needs one. I'm going to get mine in the office. So bring a book, get your bouquet. If not, there's a couple of shorter staff there. Just get one of those. Okay. Hey, what did that smash? Okay. Let's- Come on in. You go forward, opening the body. Okay, now sword to sword. This is called IoT. You both take it. Now you. Okay, so that's the form of the triangle. Now there's a circular motion in your body opening, but you don't want to give. Now there's another form of it, but we're going to start out with raise to raise, like this. Boom. Okay. Okay, so let's pair up. Let's go.
Hey, boss.
Yeah. I don't know how many. Anthony, I can't move this way because I'm staring at it. Okay. One thing that Robert Koga said to me once, he said that, for example, frontal vision, reactive, peripheral vision, faster. So one of the things is even here, wide angle lens. Boom. You're kind of seeing me right here. I'm eyeballing you. All right, now. You see this move, or Sensei would do it sometimes, is hand to sword move. Now, hold, there's a connection like that. I don't know if we could go into that to be a flow, but a lot of things, the opening motion, come on, yeah. You go into the attack with a plan right here. Come on. Even casual, even though with play acting is very serious, you're casual but not sloppy. You see what I mean? Wide, the way that, the expression Robert Koga put it, wide angle lens. Wide angle lens. Space. Without space, no connection. Okay? Okay. Okay. One thing that Hikizuchi Sensei used to say is, do not look at your opponent. Aite o mite wa ikenai in Japanese. But here, for example, right, you're facing somebody with a sword. But she's very strict. I lose that on. Wide angle lens. In other words, you're focused on her, but you're also expansive. And when you went this way, or, the whole system collapses, what you're doing with the wide angle lens, you're establishing space. No space, no connection. Come on in. There's space here, even though we're and then we have this motion. No space, no connection. So the wide angle lens gives you a more spacious sense of the situation, but also yourself. That's hard because I'm going to look at her, examine, think, react. And one of the things that's important is that here, get that motion or that motion. Come cut. Right? See, if I just stand here poking her in the face, she says, I'm going to cut him. You're making a connection, key to key. You see what I mean? And so the Aiki sword is really not about sword fighting at all. It's using swords to understand deeper avenues or dimensions of the connection that is Aikido. Okay? And in this particular case, when somebody's coming at you, your body is changing, going from a frontal position to a side triangular position. And you are in that state where your space is more expansive. Therefore, it's what you would call the wide angle lens. Good basketball players can almost see what's behind them. I used to watch Magic Johnson, and all of a sudden, he passed to somebody that for a better angle to finish. His passing was more fun than watching him score. Okay. Yeah. He sensed it. But again, you can't sense if you're a little too. So wide angle lens means more open, more relaxed. Okay. And this is a very important form because what we're doing is we're entering. Now, if I just stick it in her face, she's just, I'm going to cut it in the stomach. So right here. Hello, how are you? See, there's a connection there. I'm not trying to poke her in the face or stab her in the throat. We're establishing a bridge that connects us through ki, right? It's a martial form. All right. And one of the things you're doing is when we're coming in this direction, we're saying, yes, I am acknowledging your presence. Yes. You feel the connection? I'm not hitting you or anything. All right. Now, the person that could do that was Anno Sensei. I did some sword with him once. It wasn't anything in Japan. Mainly the person-to-person stuff was Ikizuchi Sensei. He would call me out and get a bokken. I'd grab one, and I didn't know what to do. And it was all just experiential. He would just be there, and we'd be interacting at the level of ki to ki, right? I didn't know what I was supposed to do, but that was good because if I was thinking about it, I'd mess up. Okay. And so this sort of motion right here, boom. Okay. Everybody wants to do that. Well, you don't want to charge in. Let's say you subtle movement, that one. Okay. Let's go back one more time. This is the triangular form, but it has a circular rotation to it. Now, one thing right there. Yeah, yes. One thing, if you're coming in this direction, boom. See that? Yeah. In other words, now one thing that gives you is wingspan. You see what I mean? If I'm less right, wingspan. All right. If you're coming in this direction, say boom. Hello. All right. Or if you're coming in this direction, right. Now this is a little bit more body art, kind of thing. But one thing you see, if I'm too focused on you, I paralyze myself in my reactive process. I don't want to react at all. I just want In fact, if you come this way, you just want to feel the space that air is. That's what I want to do. I want to be air. Okay? You see what I mean? In other words, you come to strike me, come on. But there's ground here. You know, there's water here, right? Air. And there's fire. Right? So all the we're touching all the bases, so to speak, right there. But that opening motion, and if you grab my wrist, that motion is we're doing the same thing here. If she's turning, do that one, or conversely, so we're going this direction, then we cut back this way. Yeah. But, you know, Japanese they call it taisabaki. Body changes. Okay. So right here, see right here, for example, that's too far, but if I go this way, I got wingspan. Right. Energetically, I'm much more open this way than I am friendly. Now I don't want to just be conscious. If it's coming in this direction, it drops from heaven. You that feeling? No. But it's not a floaty idea. I did sort of, you know, once with Anno Sensei, and he was right there, right? Sort of sharp. You know, his movements are more circular, but he was right there with the sword. Because, you know, he didn't have, you know, he was trained and not just do a pleasant form, but his movements had depth. Therefore, there were no openings, at least with heat. You see? Okay, good. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And one of the things right here is that as you're coming in, it's empty as space. Well, since it says there's something, you know, like flowing like water, sharp like fire, expansive like air or heaven, empty as space right here. All right? Surface, space. Okay? And when I'm there, the mental dialogue shuts off a bit. Yeah, body relaxes, loose, free, but not sloppy. Okay? Now, if he's coming in, there's another type of motion. We just did another movement. For example, here. Now, that's a little bit more like there's still a triangle. This is what we're doing is here. Triangle, step behind, circle. Boom. Step in, step, turn, pivot. Here. Oh. And some of this, he begins to feel a wave resting there. Oh. Okay. Now that's actually much more of an Anno Sensei type movement. Okay. But what I did initially was more angular. It was more the Hikizuchi Sensei movement. Okay. And I tend to gravitate towards that a little bit. But right here, this is now step pivot. So we're going from triangle to circle. Okay, let's keep the same partner. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, and one of Sensei teaches the Tuesday class, and Sherry Sensei, one of our senior teachers.
Yeah, hi.
How are you?
Good. Okay, why don't you keep going and I'll focus on the class for now. Okay.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay, now, one of the things right here, is that a little different feeling. Feel here the wave raising here. and stepping in. Okay. Now the one we were doing is very pointed. Boom. Or if he's raising, boom, there's this one. But this is different. Don't you feel that one? And what you're feeling is you're feeling ki. Nature, Anno Sensei liked to take a lot of his images from nature. Hikuzuki Sensei talked in terms of the kami. Yanasa Sensei didn't talk at all. It just, okay. But you see that first part right here. Like, yeah, right. Now, if you put that just and grab my wrist, you feel the same movement here. You see? And a fancy word for ki is kami. Well, since I like to describe the movement of ki through the interaction of kami, which is confusing to people, but kind of poetically here. There's his style. All right? But you see how instead of an abrupt movement, see right about here, or if you're raising, see right about here. Right here, you feel it from your toes. Not an idea, is it? And then it gets me in position for the circle here. Yes. Using information. Okay. Okay. All right. Now that first part is a triangular movement. Okay. Luke. Okay. What kind of feel? Not an abrupt movement. You should feel this from his toes. And right about here, there's that turn and cup. Okay. And what he's feeling right there, he's feeling deep. Okay. What am I feeling here? Well, you're feeling the movement of energy. Well, Sensei liked to talk in terms of gods and goddesses. For example, Tsukiyomi no Mikoto is the moon god. Japanese culture is unique. It has a sun goddess, not a sun god, and a moon god. And the moon god controlled the tides. What else did the moon god control? Moon god controlled time. Okay? So he saw various functions of the universe in terms of the kami. And these movements we're doing here were like his equations on the blackboard. He just did it body to body, but he was really researching ki. You understand? You can get so caught up in the movement, you can get better physically in the movement, and then you'll top out. One thing I kind of notice about Stephen Curry, he can still do great things. It's just he's 40 years younger than me, but for basketball, he's older. So he's got a sore knee right now. That's what happens there. So rest him for a couple of days. You'll be okay, I hope. But one of the things right here, see that too abrupt, too sloppy. Boom. You feel it from the toes, wound up. Now, that sets this motion up. Okay? So when you're doing sword, Sensei taught Hikizuchi Sensei. Hikizuchi Sensei had a background in sword, kendo, iaido. So he didn't necessarily teach him how to use the sword, but he taught him aikido sword. When they would go out in the middle of the night when it was pitch dark into the dojo, and they would train in the dark. And so what he was trying to do was to teach Hikizuchi Sensei how to sense the movement of ki, not visually see the form. See from here, it's like boom, 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 boom. Boom. You want to boom. He's going to come in. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. That's key to key. Right. We're not supposed to do this stuff just to learn how to fight. In fact, it's a useless skill. Okay. Bring a sword to a gunfight. You're going to lose. Okay, but what's the sword do? Well, it gives us another avenue. Sometimes we get so caught up in the physical training, we don't like over here, over here. Come on in. The system is otherwise occupied. If I just poke him in the face, he cuts the body. Yeah, come over here, fine. Right. So if he's going to come in, boom, 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 boom. Okay. And basically, I didn't get to go out in the middle of the night when it was black and do sword with Hikazuchi Sensei, but he would call me up. I had no idea what to do. Believe me. And he made me look like I knew what I was doing. Boom, 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 boom. That's boom, 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 boom. Okay. So what we're doing right there, we're using swords, which gives us another avenue for feeling the movement of ki. Okay. And those sensei like to talk about the functioning of ki in terms of the Shinto gods and goddesses. And one of the things right here is that this is like a wave rising. This is like a wave cresting right here. Okay. Now, if he's coming fast, it's not, the moon god doesn't just control the tide. The moon god controls time. If he's coming in this direction, boom. Like right here, time's sort of suspended for an instant. Not really, but in chi, you can kind of get the feel for it. Okay? So let's go one more time. We're going up here, stepping behind and cutting. Okay? So keep the same partner. Okay.
Item for a retiring senior, and for the town of $5.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work here. Absolutely. So for the $95. Okay. So I don't do all the same. So my wife had sometimes the best one.
Now, one of the things there's you're coming in. See that motion? As you're coming in, as I say that. See, you can get the physical movement. Boom, 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 boom. But one of the things right here, see, you begin to feel it from the toes up. You know what I mean? And so part of that is just being in the moment. As you start to perceive that, you begin to realize you can feel it because on some level we are all ki. On some level we are all kami. We come out of a divine creative force. For people, we have identities, personal histories, and everything. But we are part of the universe, which is also ki. And the functioning of the universe with itself, or Sensei, I think, called kami. So one of the things here is like, and one of the things that, I mean, I can't do this, but right about here, you kind of suspend time. If you turn in this way, you're still kind of caught up in the moment, aren't you? You feel the movement, but you also begin to feel the moment. Okay? If you're coming in this direction, but you're feeling the moment, aren't you? Not just the technique. You see what I mean? And therefore, in the moment, you're also realizing you're part of that key to key. And so, we're supposed to become more enlightened than we are right now. See, that's why we have this place. We're supposed to pass some of this on to the world, which needs it right now. Okay? Okay, good. Right there, come on. All right. As he's coming in, he's coming from underneath. If you're coming, you feel it from the toes. You see that motion? If it's too abrupt, like, boom. There are other targets, obviously, right? But if he's coming in this direction, boom, then we have that motion. If you're coming in that, it's like boom, boom, boom. Well, it sets up your entry motion. You don't always see with Anno Sensei, he didn't always. Hikizuchi Sensei's entry movements are very sharp. Okay, Anno Sensei's were this way, right? You mean, and basically you can get into the art of it, but you have to. To me, you have to go through the science of it before you really know this. In other words, you look at that. You didn't just do that. You studied, you see what I mean? You studied some of the archetypal images. You have a history of that. You added various qualities to that ocean, whatever it is right there. Yeah. You're not just somebody who's got a canvas and just messing around thinking you're building something right. There's a science to your painting, right? And so, in that way, these days, and, basically that the science is to understand who we are, right? Right. Anyway, okay, good. Okay, so what I'm going to do, it's not going to be very long, it's going to be a short one, is I'm going to do a Norito. See, Anno Sensei, where he is right now, he's with O Sensei. I imagine he has, when you first pass, you have a lot of earthly attachments, okay? But really what it is, you're going into another level of being, okay? We're ki doesn't die, right? Spirit, you can call ki spirit, you can call ki a lot of things. In fact, one of the things about kami is one way of describing kami. Another word for kami is spirit, all right? We're here, we're spirit before we have a physical body. The physical body at some point passes on. Spirit doesn't. And so the Norito is a kind of formal chant. I'm just going to do the Amatsu Nori for the mouth, a long, long, long. Okay? And we'll wait until that passes. So there's timing. Okay? Not that that's bad. I like the rhythm of it, the beat of it, right? Okay. Anyway, we're going to do the 2 bows and the 4 claps to start, and the 2 bows and the 4 claps to end. Okay. Maharani mototsumi yasume o kami. あまたの神々を集えてとことはにかみずまれます。かむらぎかむらめなみこともちて、かむいざなぎのみこと、つくしのひむかの立ち花のどのあはぎが腹に、急ぎ払い、たも時になりまする。払いどの狼たち、もろもろのまがごと積み汚れを払いたまえ、清めたまえと回すことのよしを、松神、国津神やふよろずの神たちともに、雨の淵駒の耳振り立てて、聞こしめせとかしこみも回す。 Kannagara tamachi haimase. Kannagara tamachi haimase. Get 2 bows, 4 claps. Okay. Thank you very much. The norito is a pattern of sound. Okay, the actual sense of it. The word would be kototama, which is a science that Sensei kind of studied as well, not just the physical movement, but the vibrational quality of the universe, the dimensions of the universe, which have a different vibration. So, we're here, we're in kind of a physical vibration, dense bodies, crazy world, okay? But there are other dimensions. Well, Sensei, when he was here in the physical, he was touching a lot of the finer dimensions. In fact, his level, he was touching what you call the spirit realm, kami, shinkai, laid it out, genkai, which is the material universe, the yukai, which is the hidden. Like today, we were working certain movements, and I was highlighting them with the movement of ki. That is the hidden realm. The actual movement, sword to sword, that's the material realm. And then there's what you call the shinkai, which is the divine realm. And I think what we tend to do is we pass from the physical, we kind of go into the hidden realm, and then some people make it all the way into the divine realm. And if you don't, I'm sort of a believer in reincarnation. Okay, so you go into the hidden realm for a while, then you come back if that's what you want, or in certain cases you ascend into the divine realm, the realm of kami. See, we're all out of that original place, which is kami. And then we come into these bodies, and then we have earthly experiences. But even in this earthly experience, we have the potential to understand that we're much more, and the universe is much more than that. And so today with the sword, I was kind of highlighting, the actual, I would say at my level, it's not the divine realm, but the actual hidden realm of energy movement, the movement of ki. Now, at some point, ki is coming, is spirit, and that's what we're aspiring to be. All right. Well, sometimes we actually touch it. Okay. Well, Sensei, that was his. That's where he was. And, he really talked about things like standing on Ameno Ukihashi, the floating bridge of heaven. And that was a part of his process. He said, if we only do one, the first thing you must do in Aikido, in fact, it's the only thing, is to stand on that bridge. And when you stand on that bridge, you're kind of, basically, you're unifying the manifest, hidden, and divine realms. We're not, in other words, you got a body here, but it's possible to go all the way into the more of the divine, the spirit realm, and function here as spirit. And Anno Sensei, he had a really beautiful, beautiful spirit. And so I know that it was probably difficult for him the latter stages of his life, because that tends to be hard. Okay, as you age, your body ages. And you face difficulties in health and everything. But from what I understand, I actually talked to him probably a month and a half ago, because Linda called me and said, would you want to talk to Anno Sensei? He's back from the hospital. So I did. And he was just yelling at me and telling me how beautiful I was and how I have the face of a kami-sama. That's all wishful thinking for me, but thank you. You know what I mean? So, at that point, he was always very generous. That was the one thing about him was, he was very generous with his time, with his energy, and with his love. And so, there's a picture of him that we're going to hang up when everything gets hung up. There's a bunch of things we're still waiting on, but we'll have a picture of him up, that picture right there, which I put out there. And that was done. He actually came back. Linda invited him out. We had him out in the early 90s. And then there was a lot of political stuff that kind of came up, unfortunately, with the Shingu Dojo and everything. And so, but Linda managed to invite him out. In fact, he sneaked out here. He avoided the politics. And so, I reconnected with him when he would sneak out here, and then eventually he kind of went to the Shingo Dojo and squared it up with Hikazuchi Sensei, who was going, but it got squared away. So, there's politics, unfortunately, even in Aikido. That's kind of the material realm. And there's also some movement of energy. But at the divine level, we're all equal, right? In other words, as much as it seems like an ascent, it really is an interior journey. In fact, we're here. We're very, very lucky to have this place. In fact, we're going the opposite direction. A lot of schools are closing because they can't afford a place. So what we really need to do, we need to populate this place so we can keep it. And so we're going to be having events like we're doing the divisional training end of February, the 21st. Okay. We will be doing a grand reopening in April, which I'd like to include people in the planning of it. Okay. And we opened in 1976 here on 6th Street. And we're reopening now. So it's not an opening, it's a grand reopening. But you see, 50 years. 1976, 2026, you do the math. So that's significant. And so, one of the things, especially since he passed, is to kind of internalize as best we can his message, which was love, connection. But he was not just somebody flouting stuff. His art was very sound. And that's also a challenge to not just do the pretty movements. His movements were beautiful, but they were also very, very effective movements. So to complete our Aikido education is to find that balance in ourselves that allows us to mature to that level, right? We don't stop learning. I mean, even a Shihonage that we're doing today, that's infinite. Those are equations or algorithms that don't stop teaching us about who we are and what the universe really is. Okay, so it is one of those things, and we lost a giant in Anno Sensei, but he lives through those of you that had a chance to train with him, and possibly me and Linda Holiday Sensei, and what we're building here. He's part of that foundation. Okay, thank you for your time. And be careful when you stand up. Okay. Yeah. One of our teachers just passed yesterday. Yeah, so we did a kind of ceremony for him. It's